The center court at Indian Wells possesses a peculiar kind of silence when the desert wind drops after dusk. It is an arena that has a habit of validating greatness or ruthlessly exposing the uninitiated. For 3 decades, I have watched the sports prodigies walk down that long concrete tunnel, their eyes darting between the towering stadium upper decks and the baseline that can feel 10 miles wide under television lights. We saw it when a young, fearless American named Serena Williams defied the local crowd in 1999, and we felt that identical, distinct shift in the atmosphere when Alexandra Eala took her stance against the reigning elite of the modern game. A ledger reading 16 victories and 11 defeats in the middle of May does not typically cause the tectonic plates of the Women's Tennis Association to shift. Yet, the numbers themselves tell only the most superficial version of the story. The true narrative lives in the identity of the defeated, the manner of the breakthroughs, and the sudden, unmistakable realization that the traditional hierarchy is no longer secure. When a young player from an unconventional tennis nation emerges, the established order usually greets them with a mixture of curiosity and comfortable condescension. We witnessed this pattern during the rise of Lina at the turn of the century, an era where Asian tennis was viewed through a lens of defensive consistency rather than raw, dictatorial power. What transpired in the California desert during the early spring of 2026, however, shattered that comfortable template. To see a 20-year-old left-hander refuse to yield an inch of territory against a Grand Slam champion is to understand that the sport is undergoing an organic recalibration. This was not a victory born of a veteran's fatigue or a lucky net cord on a humid evening. It was a methodical dismantling of expectations. The international tennis community, so often guilty of looking only at the seeding numbers next to a name, found itself forced to look at the geometry of the court itself. To appreciate the gravity of this moment, one must look back to the moments where a single match altered the trajectory of an entire tour. Think of Monica Seles in 1989, disrupting the elegant supremacy of Steffi Graf with an unprecedented, double-handed ferocity from both wings. While the stylistic comparison may differ, the psychological impact remains identical. Alexandra Eala arrived in the 2026 season as an intriguing prospect, a highly decorated junior whose transition to the senior ranks was projected to be a long, deliberate climb. Instead, she chose to accelerate the timeline. Her campaign has resembled a classic 3-act drama, complete with the harsh lessons of the Southern Hemisphere, the grueling education of the Middle Eastern hard courts, and the ultimate validation in the American desert. The conversation has fundamentally shifted. No longer is she framed as an ambassador for the growth of the sport in Southeast Asia. She is now discussed as a structural problem that top 10 coaches must solve before the gates of Roland Garros open. The foundation of this remarkable ascent was laid not under the bright lights of a combined master-level event, but in the relatively modest surroundings of the Auckland Open. Early January in New Zealand offers a brutal test of a player's off-season work. The wind whips off the Hauraki Gulf, testing the stability of a player's ball toss and the discipline of their footwork. It was here that the physical transformation of the young Filipina first became apparent to those of us who spend our lives analyzing the kinetic chains of elite athletes. In her opening rounds against Aina Shibara and Kamila Rakimova, there was an unfamiliar weight to her shots. Her forehand, historically a reliable rallying tool, had mutated into a genuine weapon of penetration. The ball was leaving her racket face with an altered revolutions per minute count, biting into the court and skidding through the court surface in a manner that caught seasoned baseliners off guard. Her semi-final run in Auckland eventually ended at the hands of Wang Xinyu, a defeat that was as instructive as it was painful. Wang possesses a kind of flat, low-margin power that can make a developing defender feel entirely helpless. 4-2 sets. Eala was forced into the corners, her defensive slides tested to their absolute limits. It was a stark reminder that at the elite level, consistency without depth is simply an invitation to be dictated to. The match exposed a lingering vulnerability in Eala's secondary serves, a tendency to drop the ball too short into the box when under physical duress. Yet, the maturity of an athlete is rarely defined by their flawless days. It is measured by the speed with which they integrate a loss into their tactical evolution. The subsequent journey to Melbourne for the Australian Open was supposed to be the grand unveiling, the moment where the main draw breakthrough would signal her arrival on the grandest stage. Tennis, however, is an expert dispenser of humility. The early exit in the first Grand Slam of the year could have broken a more fragile psyche. The local media had built the expectations to a fever pitch, treating a debutante as if she were a seasoned top 10 mainstay. When the match slid away in a flurry of unforced errors, the post-match press conference had the air of a premature autopsy. What those critics failed to observe was a subtle refinement taking place beneath the surface. The exposure to that specific, suffocating pressure is a mandatory tax that every future champion must pay. You cannot learn how to breathe in a Grand Slam stadium by playing Tier 2 events in front of empty grandstands. You must feel the crowd's collective gasp when a break point goes begging. The true turning point of this 2026 campaign materialized during the Middle East swing, a stretch of the calendar that separates the genuine contenders from the transient success stories. The courts in Abu Dhabi and Dubai are notoriously fast, demanding lightning-quick racket preparation and an unshakable belief in one's defensive instincts. In Abu Dhabi, the tennis world received its first true warning sign. Eala navigated her way into the quarterfinals, pushing a seasoned tour veteran to the absolute brink of elimination. The performance was characterized by a newfound willingness to take the ball on a rise, tactical adjustments that denied her opponents the time necessary to set up their heavy ground strokes. Then came Dubai, a tournament that will likely be viewed by historians as the crucible where Eala's competitive identity was forged. The draw was a murderer's row of contemporary women's tennis. Her opening match against Hailey Baptiste was a grueling exercise in problem-solving. Baptiste possesses a heavy, looping topspin that can force smaller players into a state of constant physical retreat. Eala countered this by shortening her backswing, meeting the ball at the apex of its bounce, and utilizing her left-handed slice to pull the American out of her comfort zone. It was a masterclass in tactical adaptability, a sign that her tennis intelligence quotient was growing exponentially with every match. The momentum gathered in the early rounds carried her into a confrontation with Jasmine Paolini, the diminutive Italian, whose recent exploits at the majors have redefined the concept of court coverage. Paolini is an established elite, a player who wins matches through a combination of relentless physical endurance and a devastating inside-out forehand. To defeat her requires more than just hitting the ball hard. It requires an athlete to win the psychological war of attrition. Eala outdueled the Italian at her own game. The rallies regularly exceeded 20 strokes, the ball crossing the net with a ferocity that left both players visibly gasping between points. The key to Eala's triumph was her down-the-line backhand, a shot she produced with unerring accuracy whenever Paolini attempted to cheat toward her backhand corner to protect her forehand wing. The quarterfinal against Sorana Sirsti provided a completely different stylistic challenge. Sirsti is a classical hardcourt player, an athlete who strikes the ball with flat trajectory and prefers to keep the points short and explosive. If you allow her to find a rhythm from the center of the court, she will systematically take you apart. Eala's response was to vary the height and depth of her balls, utilizing the moonball to disrupt Sirsti's strike zone before dropping a short, angled slice to bring the Romanian forward. The victory was a testament to a young player's ability to conceptualize the sport not as a series of isolated ball-striking exercises, but as a complex chess match played at 130 kilometers per hour. The subsequent quarterfinal match against Coco Gauff in Dubai was, on paper, a comprehensive defeat. Gauff's athletic supremacy was on full display, her coverage of the court making the dimensions of the stadium appear incredibly small for the young challenger. Eala left that match with a deficit on the scoreboard, but an invaluable blueprint in her mind. She had felt the absolute pinnacle of modern tennis defense. She had seen how a world-class athlete converts a defensive position into an offensive strike within the span of a single stride. Most young players leave such encounters demoralized, their confidence shattered by the realization of the gap that exists between the top 5 and the rest of the world. Eala, conversely, viewed it as a diagnostic report. The vindication arrived in California. The BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells is frequently referred to as the 5th Grand Slam, and the slow, gritty hard courts combined with the thin desert air create a playing environment that is entirely unique. The ball flies through the air but grabs the surface upon landing, a combination that rewards players who can generate their own power while maintaining meticulous control over their depth. When the draw pitted Eala against Gauff in a highly anticipated rematch, the consensus among the press corps was unanimous. The American was expected to deliver another routine lesson in elite-level tennis. The opening games, however, signaled that a completely different script was being written. Eala stepped onto the court with demeanor that bordered on the stoic. The nervous energy that had compromised her performance in Dubai was entirely absent. Instead, she executed a tactical plan that was both brilliant and daring. Recognizing that Gauff's backhand is one of the most impenetrable walls in the modern game, Eala systematically targeted the American's forehand wing. She did not do this with reckless power, but with a relentless, heavy, topspin cross-court ball that forced Gauff to strike the ball above her shoulder line. It is a historical reality that Gauff's extreme Western grip on the forehand side can become vulnerable when the ball is consistently directed high and deep into that quadrant. As the first set progressed, the tension inside the stadium became palpable. Eala was refusing to miss. Her footwork was immaculate, her small adjustment steps allowing her to remain perfectly balanced even when Gauff unleashed her trademark down-the-line accelerations. The young lefty's service games, long considered the weakest link in her armor, held firm under the weight of multiple break points. She was finding the T-split with her first serve and utilizing a heavy, kicking wide serve into the ad court that pulled the American completely out of the doubles alley. The unforced errors began to accumulate from the racket of the world #1 contender. The American's confidence, usually so unshakable, began to visibly fray as her opponent countered every athletic recovery with composed, clinical winner into the open court. By the time the match reached its dramatic conclusion, with Gauff forced to retire due to physical distress, Eala was already in complete command of the competitive momentum. The retirement should not diminish the achievement. The physical breakdown of an opponent is often the direct result of the psychological and physical pressure applied during the preceding hours. Eala had forced Gauff to run extra miles, to hit extra balls, and to take risks that her body was ultimately unable to sustain on that particular afternoon. In the span of 2 hours, the perception of Alexandra Eala had been permanently altered. She was no longer just a dangerous floating rapper in a draw. She was an established reality. This 16-11 record is a definitive proof of an elite apprenticeship. It is a sequence of results that reflects the true, unvarnished nature of a breakthrough season on the main tour. Consider the victories that have defined this run. Jasmine Paolini, Sorana Cîrstea, Hailey Baptiste, and Coco Gauff. These are not names plucked from the lower tiers of the ranking system. These are established tournament champions, athletes who have contested the final Sundays of majors and who understand every nuance of match management. To collect these scalps before the end of May is an achievement that places Eala in a very exclusive statistical tier. The technical adjustments that have facilitated this rise deserve closer inspection. The most significant development is the stabilization of her left-handed identity. Throughout tennis history, the elite left-hander has possessed a distinct tactical advantage, from Martina Navratilovan's sliding serve to Rafael Nadal's devastating hook into the right-hander's backhand. Eala is beginning to understand how to maximize this natural geometry. Her slider wide in the ad court has become an efficient tool for holding service games, allowing her to establish an immediate advantage in the rally. Furthermore, her ability to redirect the ball down the line with her forehand has prevented opponents from simply camping in their backhand corners to protect against her cross-court patterns. Her physical evolution is equally profound. The transition from the junior circuit to the WTA Tour is primarily a physical shock. In the juniors, an athlete can rely on superior talent or a single great shot to navigate through a tournament. In the seniors, every player can run for 3 hours. Every player can exploit a weak second serve, and every player will target a psychological vulnerability. Eala's off-season conditioning has clearly given her the structural strength required to survive these heavy baseline exchanges. Her recovery times between points have shortened significantly, and her movement in the third hour of a match retains the explosive quality that was previously missing. The upcoming transition to the European clay courts represents the next great test of this 2026 campaign. The Strasbourg Open will serve as the immediate laboratory for her clay court aspirations. Clay is a surface that demands a different kind of patience, a willingness to construct points over 10 or 12 shots without looking for a premature termination. It is a surface that historical purists value above all others because it strips away the artificial advantages of modern equipment and forces a player to reveal their true tactical soul. For a left-hander with a heavy topspin forehand and excellent movement, the red dirt should theoretically be a natural home. The sliding mechanics, the ability to open up the court with angled ground strokes, and the utility of the drop shot are all elements that align perfectly with her developing skill set. The broader implications for the WTA Tour are fascinating. The women's game has spent the last several years searching for a consistent group of rivalries to define the post-Williams era. We have seen magnificent champions emerge, but the depth of the tour means that any player in the top 50 is capable of producing a transcendent week. Alexandra Eala's emergence adds an entirely new dimension to this competitive ecosystem. She brings an entire continent's expectations with her every time she steps onto the court, a geopolitical reality that can either crush an athlete or provide them with an inexhaustible reservoir of motivation. The way she has handled this burden suggests that she possesses the rare emotional intelligence required to turn external expectation into internal fuel. Look at the way she conducts herself during the changeovers. There is no histrionic gesturing toward her coaching box, no smashing of rackets, no public displays of self-pity. She sits with her head down, processing the tactical data of the previous two games, preparing for the next sequence. This emotional equilibrium is a far more reliable indicator of long-term success than a spectacular backhand or a 120-mile-per-hour serve. It is a quality that allowed Chris Evert to dominate a generation, the quiet intensity that defined Steffi Graf during her Golden Slam run in 1988. Eala has that identical, unteachable stillness at her core. The analytical community is now forced to reevaluate its projections for the rest of the calendar year. The French Open is no longer an event where she will simply be happy to participate in the main draw. Her performances in Dubai and Indian Wells have ensured that none of the top 16 seeds will want to see her name placed in their section of the bracket during the live draw ceremony. She has proven that her best tennis is capable of disrupting the rhythm of the finest players on earth. The challenge now shifts from the thrill of the chase to the burden of consistency. The tour is a highly efficient scouting machine. Within weeks, every coach on the circuit will have analyzed her matches from the Middle East and California, identifying remaining technical flaws and developing specific strategies to negate her strengths. How an athlete responds to being scouted is the ultimate dividing line in professional tennis. It is one thing to surprise the world when you are an unheralded teenager from Manila. It is an entirely different proposition to back up that success when your opponent knows exactly where you prefer to place your first serve on a break point. This is a stage of a career where tactical stagnation is fatal. Eala must continue to add layers to her game, to refine her net play, to improve the depth of her slice backhand, and to ensure that her second serve remains a tool of containment rather than an invitation to be attacked. The next 5 years will determine whether this 2026 season is remembered as a beautiful, isolated anomaly or the opening chapter of career that would define an era. The sport of tennis has a long memory, and its pantheon is reserved only for those who can sustain their excellence across seasons, surfaces, and generations. We have seen many bright stars flash across the sky of the women's tour, only to burn out under the intense heat of the spotlight or the physical toll of the modern baseline game. The early indications suggest that Alexandra Eala is built for the long journey. Her tennis is grounded in structural realities rather than emotional streaks. The unanswerable questions that remain are what make this sport the most compelling theater in human culture. Can her left-handed geometry find a way to conquer the heavy, flat ball of the indoor grass courts at Wimbledon? Will her physical frame withstand the brutal attrition of consecutive 3-set matches during the humid August weeks leading up to the U.S. Open? These are the puzzles that she must solve in full view of a global audience. The answers will not be found in the statistics or the analytical models. They will be revealed on the clay of Paris, the lawns of London, and the concrete of New York. As we stand on the precipice of the European summer, there's a distinct sense that we are witnessing the passing of a quiet frontier. The old arguments about her potential have been rendered obsolete by the reality of her performances. She has earned her place at the table of elite tennis through the most honest currency the sport possesses: victories over world-class opponents. The journey ahead is long, and it will undoubtedly contain further moments of disappointment, tactical setbacks, and painful defeats. That is the nature of the sport. True greatness is not a destination that is reached without a struggle. It is a continuous negotiation with one's own limitations. Alexandra Eala has shown the tennis world that she is entirely willing to enter that negotiation. When the first ball is struck at the Strasbourg Open, the world will no longer be watching a promising talent from an emerging nation. We will be watching an established competitor who has looked the finest players of her generation in the eye and refused to blink.